I think this might end up being a pretty unpopular video. I'm seeing a lot of love for this film online, and I wish I could say I was in that crowd. I really wanted Fantastic Four First Steps to be that brilliant Fantastic Four film I've always wanted, but man, it's not even close to being the film I wanted. Fantastic Four First Steps is that rare kind of frustrating film. It had so much going for it. There's a ton of potential there, but thanks to a pretty mid script and some shitty post-production editing, Fantastic Four never really lives up to that potential. I'm not calling Fantastic Four an outright bad film. It's a competently made flick. It has its moments. It gets some things right. It just gets a hell of a lot more things wrong. So I guess the best place to start is with the casting. For me, this film was always going to hinge on the casting. And man, we've got a pretty good cast here. We got Pedro, Joseph Quinn, Cousins here, and Vanessa Kirby. It's a pretty stacked cast. But the thing is though, of the four main cast members, I'm only really sold on one of these actors in the role that they're in. Pedro Pascal was never my pick for Reed. I mean, I would for sure have gone with someone younger. But he's a good actor. I was thinking he might do something interesting with it. He might pull it out of the bag, so to speak. But he really doesn't. The version of Reed we're getting here feels so muted, man. He's so tired sounding. He lacks that juice, the energy. Reed in the comics is a guy who could disappear into his laboratory for days on end, just burying himself in work. He's a passionate, driven guy whose mind is always working on like 6 different problems at once. I'm just not getting that vibe here from Pascal's Reed. I feel like this Reed just doesn't have the enthusiasm, that passion for the science that we've seen from the other actors that have played this character. And I don't think that this is Pascal's fault either. It's the characterization of Reed that I think leaves this version of Reed Richards down. To me, Pedro could be any generic big-brain scientist. There's nothing about his performance or this characterization that screams Reed to me. John Krasinski, for like the 3 minutes we saw him in Multiverse of Madness, had that energy I was looking for. He really did feel like the classic Reed from the comics to me. I'm just really unsure why they would go with Pedro Pascal over Krasinski here. Krasinski feels like a natural fit for the role. Pedro Pascal doesn't really feel anything like Reed to me. And this problem with characterization, Reed isn't the only character that's impacted by it. After watching The Bear, Ebon Moss-Bachrach feels like the perfect pick for Ben Grimm. Cousin here feels like he could have been born and raised on Yancey Street. But Bachrach's Ben Grimm, like Pascal's Reed, feels so muted here. The thing is larger than life in personality. Think of the loudest, gruffest dude you know. Yeah, he's that guy. And that gruffness, that larger than life personality, which made Ebon Moss-Bachrach the perfect fit for the Thing, it feels like it's been sandpapered down here. Even the Thing's voice just sounds like a regular guy's voice for some reason. Even small things like his catchphrase, "It's clobbering time." Turns out that's not actually something this version of the Thing actually says. This is a catchphrase used by the Thing in the in-universe cartoon series. People piss on the Tim Story Fantastic Four films a lot, and they have their problems for sure, but the one thing you can't really fault those films on was the characterizations of the Four. Michael Chiklis felt like the Thing. He was always flying off the handle at Johnny for some stupid prank or eating a ridiculous amount of food or arguing with Reed. This version of the Thing just feels dull by comparison. And what's annoying is that for sure I know that Ebon would be able to bring it for the Thing. He could for sure deliver that 100% comic book accurate Thing personality. He's got all the potential for it. It's just a characterization, man. It's just not where it needs to be. The Thing is dull here, man. He's not interesting. And that's the worst possible thing you could say about the Thing. A character who is larger than life. He's the beating heart of the Fantastic Four. And he's just not interesting here. Joseph Quinn's Human Torch is another story. Quinn was always a guy I was dubious about for this role. Being honest, I don't know why everyone was all over this guy as the Human Torch. Sure, I like him as Eddie as much as the next guy in Stranger Things, but nothing about this guy has ever screamed Johnny Storm to me. Like, I can see why Chris Evans was cast as Johnny Storm. He's got that swagger, that cockiness that Johnny Storm has in spades. Same with Michael B. Jordan, he has the energy for it. But Joseph Quinn, I don't know, man, he's not really Johnny Storm material. To me at least, Quinn's performance feels forced. Like the Johnny Storm character isn't one that comes naturally to him. I never questioned Chris Evans' performance because he felt like Johnny Storm. That character felt like a natural fit for Evans as an actor. He didn't feel like a guy pretending to be Johnny Storm, which is what Quinn feels like here. Evans was Johnny Storm. And again, like with Reed and Ben, feels like a lot of Johnny's more obvious character traits have been stripped back here. In the comics, Johnny's a brash kid, a hothead, if you will. He's always winding Ben up, pushing his buttons, doing some immature bullshit. I'm not seeing much of that here. Sure, you see him banter back and forth with Ben a bit, and he can be kind of juvenile at times, but overall, I just don't think it's enough to really capture Johnny's personality from the comics. I don't know, Joseph Quinn could be playing anyone here. Like with Pascal's Reed, nothing about Quinn's performance or characterization feels distinctly like Johnny Storm. I'm sorry guys, I'm just not buying these characterizations. The only characterization that feels truly on point is Sue Storm. Vanessa Kirby is doing a great job here, and I think she's actually really carrying the film. Her Sue Storm feels like it was lifted off the page. The only character out of the Fantastic Four roster that I feel that this film gets actually right. Ladies and gents, since I have your attention, I wanted to touch on a cause that is particularly close to my heart. On your screen right now is a GoFundMe page set up by a very good friend of mine, Elliot Gannon. Elliot and his family are in an extremely difficult place right now. They created this GoFundMe page to raise the necessary funds to assist their son Ree, who was born with a very rare condition called SMA Type 1, or Spinal Muscular Atrophy Type 1. The link for this GoFundMe can be found in the description of this video and as a pinned comment down below. Please, if you have a few moments and a few bucks to spare, please consider donating. It would mean the world to me, and it would be greatly appreciated by Elliot and his family. It's an extremely worthy cause, and like I mentioned, one that's so close to my own heart. Thanks guys. The writers wanted to hit the ground running with this first film, so they obviously didn't want to waste the audience's time redoing the origin again. We've already seen that twice already. So instead, we pick up 4 years on from when the Four got their powers. And man, I'm a little conflicted about this time jump. It feels like we're skipping over a lot of really important character stuff here. As the film opens, the Four are embraced publicly. They're pretty much rock stars. And sure, it's nice to start a story with your team fully formed. As a writer, it lets you hit the ground running with the story. But you see, I also want to see the team grow, develop, and mature. I want to see them earn their place as the world's defenders. Have them earn the public's trust. Probably over a few films if I'm being honest. I don't want to hear about how great the Fantastic Four. I want to see them become great. We're beginning the first entry in this franchise with the characters already in the position I'd like to see them in by the third film. When I said we were missing out on important stuff, I'm talking about character-defining important stuff. The writers on this film didn't want to retread the same ground with The Thing. So Ben isn't learning to deal with his appearance in this film. He's already made peace with that. He's moved on from it. That's a pretty big part of The Thing's character development, and we're just skipping over it here for the sake of not wanting to retread old ground. We find out that Sue is pregnant at the start of the film. But you know what would have also been really nice? If maybe we could have had one film before this, where we just had the typical Fantastic Four lineup, and then in the sequel, we could see how having Franklin has changed the characters and the team dynamic. And gee, I hope you weren't married to the idea of seeing a Fantastic Four film where Mole Man was going to be the big bad, because as of the first film in this franchise, the Mole Man's days of being a Fantastic Four villain are well behind him. We see in a montage at the start of this film that the Mole Man has turned away from being a villain and has worked with Sue to bring Subterranea into the UN. Would have been nice if we could have maybe actually seen these developments over time, instead of just being told about them. Seeing Sue and Harvey's relationship develop over the course of a few films, see them going from enemies to allies. Again, you could say it's a pretty small thing, but these are major characters we're talking about here. The Mole Man's pretty big in the comics. Would have been nice if we could have maybe explored the character a bit more. And this stuff I wasn't wild about, but I could forgive it. But the editing in this film, man, it's some seriously poor shit. This film has so much obviously cut content, it's actually kind of funny. There are whole character subplots set up in this film that don't get concluded because the editors had to cut them for time. It feels like Ben Grimm's entire arc was left on the cutting room floor. Remember how I said that the writers on this flick skipped over probably the most important character arc for Ben Grimm? Well, I could learn to live with that if the writers gave him another character arc I could get invested in. But unfortunately for me, apparently Ben's entire arc in this film was hacked to shit and then just forgotten about. The Thing is just kind of there in this film, just kind of pottering about. He's really the only character in the film who obviously doesn't have anything to do. I mean, he grows a beard at one point. I guess you could technically call that development. I can't think of anything he does in this film to progress the story forward or progress his own character forward. But then I guess he doesn't really have a character arc to progress forward, so whatever. There is a storyline involving Natasha Lyonne's Rachel Rosman being interested in Ben romantically, but this whole story barely gets out of the meet cute phase. Describing the 2 brief scenes these characters share as meaningful would be a stretch. I've had more meaningful conversations with the bartender at my local while he's pulling me a pint of Guinness than these 2 have in this film. It's a pointless storyline that goes nowhere and pays nothing off. And when I say it pays nothing off, we don't see Natasha Lyonne's Rachel Rosman after her second appearance. I was expecting her to show up at the end, maybe set up a storyline for the next film. But nope, it's like the writers just forgot to add in that final scene where Ben asks her out after the final battle. There's also another scene in this film that I feel really showcases how badly edited this movie was. At one point in this film, the 4 are trying to get their plan to beat Galactus off the ground. They come up with the idea of placing the people of New York out of harm's way in Mole Man's underground lair. We get this scene of Paul Walter Hauser's Harry the Elder being really difficult with Reed due to their shared history. In turn, we also see Reed really hating that he has to ask Mole Man for a favor, and this scene would have worked out really well if we had ever seen these 2 characters interact before this point to establish their antagonistic relationship. But because this is the first time these 2 characters, from our perspective, have actually shared the screen together, the scene is kind of robbed of its impact. Because that history that these 2 characters have together, the context, has obviously been cut from this film. That montage at the start of the film that shows the 4 taking on some of their typical villains from the comics, the Mole Man is one of them, but I don't think that's really enough to make this scene work. It's kind of a blink and you'll miss it cameo almost. I can understand why the writers went with Shalabal over Norrin Radd. We've already seen the classic Silver Surfer storyline done in the second Tim Story Fantastic Four film. Also, it's kind of cool that in this alternate universe, Norrin Radd was never the Surfer, and it was always Shalabal. This is a different reality from the one you might know. Things are different here. That's cool. I like it. It's creative. But what I can't understand though, is why the writers went to the trouble of introducing a new version of the Surfer for this film, only to then do nothing interesting with her. Shalabal has almost the exact same origin as Norrin Radd's Silver Surfer. I'm all for multiversal interpretations of existing characters, man. I think that's the coolest shit, honestly. I love Flashpoint Batman and Earth 2. The only thing I ask from stories where we're getting a new interpretation of a character is that the writers go all out and do something new, something we haven't seen before. When we're getting a non-typical interpretation of a character, I don't want a typical storyline with a non-typical character interpretation. I want a non-typical story to go along with the non-typical character interpretation. You dig? Now, there are certain concessions I expect when reading or watching a story involving Galactus and his Herald the Silver Surfer. I know that whoever is the Herald of Galactus is only in the world reluctantly, and they're only there to save their own planet. I also expect that at the end the Silver Surfer is going to turn on Galactus and try to stalk him. But considering we're getting a new take on the Silver Surfer here, could you maybe have tried something different? Put a new spin on the origin maybe, or maybe do anything to really make me sit up and take notice of this new version of the Silver Surfer. I want to like this character, man, but you're giving me no reason to. There's nothing really interesting about her. Bare minimum, just give me something visually interesting. A sick design. Make her look badass. This looks like it was rendered on a Commodore 64. This is how the character looks in the comics. This is the Silver Surfer from Fantastic Four 2, a film released almost 20 years ago. You're telling me this is the best you can do? How about giving Shalabal a really interesting personality? Or maybe a few additional scenes with Johnny Storm. Apparently fleshing out her character was a focus in a previous draft of the script. The Silver Surfer being a girl that Johnny is attracted to is an interesting idea, man, I like it. You could get an interesting side story going on the strength of that idea alone. I don't typically focus on the romantic subplots in movies, but a story about a female Silver Surfer and Johnny Storm getting together, that's interesting precisely because I haven't seen it before in the comics. Johnny being attracted to Shalabal is the most creative thing the writers do with this new take on the Surfer. But unfortunately, like with the Ben and Rachel Rosman story, it goes nowhere. Kind of feels like it only goes one way. It's a mad undercooked storyline, when it could have been one of the most interesting side stories in the film. That sacrifice that Shalabal makes at the end, saving Johnny, that would have hit way harder if the writers actually bothered to develop a platonic or romantic relationship between the two of them. Shalabal's sacrifice at the end is only for her own redemption, which is typical for the Surfer. Redemption is a big part of the Silver Surfer's arc in the comics. Maybe a more interesting idea, a new idea, would have been if her sacrifice at the end was to save Johnny, the man she loved, who she was in a relationship with, from Galactus, and also for her own redemption. That would have been something we hadn't seen before. And her apparent death here? Yeah, it's not even so much as commented on by Johnny at the end. Johnny's whole character arc in this film revolved around Shalabal to some extent, him trying to communicate with her, to understand her, but when she apparently buys it at the end, suddenly Johnny's got nothing to say. I just have to question why bother having these side stories in here at all if they're so unimportant. The editors can just cut them short before they've had any kind of thematic or emotional resolution. You might as well just cut the entire storyline then. Watching these side stories just peter out into nothing is like reading a comic book, getting to the end, only to find some asshole has ripped out the final page. It's frustrating, man, and it's a waste of the audience's time. You're setting up stories that don't have any payoff, that go nowhere. I'm not here to piss on everything about this film. I did appreciate that Matt Shakman gave us the 60s setting. But for me, the 60s setting in a Fantastic Four film was half the ask. Maybe I have this one wrong, but what I thought people meant when they said they wanted a 60s set Fantastic Four film was that they wanted a 60s set Fantastic Four film that leaned into that crazy 60s Kirby Fantastic Four iconography. When I think of the Fantastic Four in the 60s, I think of this stuff. This doesn't evoke 60s Fantastic Four comics to me. This feels more like generic-ass Tomorrowland retrofuturism. I wanted Jack Kirby retrofuturism, because that's the shit. I wanted to see Reed's comic-accurate 1960s lab with some cool Kirby-inspired tech, but what did I get instead? A big-ass chalkboard. Gee, it's like the 60s comics come to life. Overall, I just didn't feel like this film capitalized on the uniqueness of the time period in any interesting way. This is an alternate universe, totally removed from the main MCU sacred timeline. It's a totally different world, and I want to know more about it, but we never really learn anything interesting about this alternate Earth, or its alternate history, even passively through dialogue. World building can be done subtly, but there just isn't any world building going on here. I'd love to know what the politics of this world looks like, or even something as simple as who is the President of America in this timeline? Is it Kennedy? Stuff like that. It might be small, but it kind of paints kind of an interesting picture of a world, What would have been so effective would have been a Watchmen-style opening montage, showing how Reed has basically changed the course of history with his genius. Snapshots of newspaper articles of how Reed developed faster-than-light travel, while the Soviets were still trying to figure out how to get to the moon. Something like that. Or, show me some of the crazy technological advancements he's made. The 60s setting feels skin deep here. I appreciate that we got a Fantastic Four film set in this time period. It's actually crazy when you think about it, but I'm frustrated that there was no exploration of the time period, or of this alternate world. The 60s setting just feels like the biggest missed opportunity of this film. Oh yeah, the post-credit scene. I want to touch on this real quick. It's Doom, and he has his mask off. Great that we're keeping things comic accurate with Dr. Doom already. Everyone knows Doom just loves to whip that mask off. You know how I feel about this version of Doom already. There is something I am curious about though. That montage from the start, we get to see the FF face off against some of their rogues gallery. And there's mentions of El Diablo, Red Ghost, and of course Mole Man. But there isn't any reference to Dr. Doom, like at all. In fact, there's no mention whatsoever of Dr. Doom in this film. There's references to Latveria, and a quick blinking you'll miss it, cutaway shot to an empty UN seat for Latveria at the United Nations. But that's about it. So what, the Fantastic Four have been operating for like 4 years and they haven't encountered Dr. Doom yet? That feels a little bit off. The post-credit scene is set 4 years after the conclusion of the movie, and Doom is here. I'm curious about this, man. Is this the first time Sue has encountered Dr. Doom? Because if it is, that would mean the Fantastic Four have been operating now for the better part of a decade, and they've never encountered their arch-nemesis. It just feels odd that the Fantastic Four could have been operating for that long and wouldn't have encountered it. That feels like such a massive thing to omit from the Fantastic Four's history. Anyways, Fantastic Four, it had a lot going for it, man. I wanted to love it. Really, I did. This is the third attempt at getting the Fantastic Four right, but I can't say it accomplishes that goal. It falls down in too many areas which I consider to be crucial. The Fantastic Four is a very unique team of characters, man, and I feel we still haven't gotten the film that truly explores how great and unique these characters are. I'm not writing this version of the Fantastic Four off, not at all. I honestly hope that with a much better script and maybe a different director, the sequel will be that Fantastic Four film I've always wanted. Man, I hate negative reviews. I hate negative reviews for films I was really hoping to love. But you know what, maybe they'll do something interesting with the Fantastic Four and Doomsday. Kind of seems like they're setting up some big stuff there. So, you know, fingers crossed for that. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, maybe hit the notification bell on your way out. And as always, thanks for watching.